Hi, everyone. This is Angel Borrelli. Welcome to Season 9, Episode 2 of The Fix. And I'm here with my good friend, colleague, and head coach of Bellarmine University, Larry Owens. Hi, Larry.
Hi, Angel.
Larry, thank you so much for coming on today. And as I mentioned to you when I invited you onto this show, it's such an important show. And the information that I'm going to be sharing is something so important, but yet complicated. But if coaches and pitchers can even wrap their brain around this information in a small way, great things can happen to their pitching motion. So you are today going to be representing all the coaches and all the listeners, and I absolutely want you to stop me the minute I say something that I haven't explained clear enough, because you're going to feel like you're sitting in an anatomy class to begin with. But if anybody wants to transfer this knowledge to their pitchers, or if a pitcher wants to try this, or if a coach needs to look for this error in the pitching motion, you need to have a concept of understanding. So I've got tons of pictures today, everyone, and Larry's going to be your mouthpiece in terms of anything I say that is too complicated or I haven't said it clear enough. So thank you so much for taking the time to be here. But before we get started on that, I have something I want to talk about with the major leagues that I just heard this morning, and I was so impassioned by it, but it reminded me of why I do the work I do. And I really want to share my thinking about this with my audience, because I appreciate you guys tuning in. And who I am is everything to you in terms of my belief system and why I do the work I do. Every day when I watch some of the major league pitchers and I see some of their mechanics and the way they're using their bodies, I say to myself, why do I do what I do? Because I teach an efficient motion, which is really what a sports scientist does. We don't put bells and whistles on things. Or let's put it this way, as a sports scientist and a kinesiologist, and not having been a pitcher, I have no right to say, oh, well, if you spin around this way, it's going to be better. No, I have to teach it black and white, just like I've always said. I'm the English teacher who teaches great grammar. So then if you want to go out and be a rapper or you want to use slang, it's still going to sound intelligent. So when I saw what I saw this morning, I was impassioned in a way that I want to share with my listeners. So just for everyone, we're recording this on the morning of April 14th. And the talk of the town today is Kershaw. He was pitching a perfect game, 13 strikeouts in 7 innings. Did you hear this story yet, Larry?
Yes, on the bus. I was on the bus when I came out. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so he's throwing a perfect game. And by the way, I didn't realize this. There hasn't been a perfect game in the last 7 years. And of course, everybody's talking about the new rules and all the things that are going on. So they pull him in the 7th inning. They don't pull him. He doesn't go out. He's got 12, 13 strikeouts. Okay, so he's averaging about 2 strikeouts an out. So an inning. So he doesn't go back in. And of course, there was tons of discussion about this. And in fact, some ex-baseball players tweeted, and they put these on the screen, of what a bunch of BS this is. And in fact, one baseball player said, those of you who don't play baseball and you're making these rules, please get out of the way. Everyone was completely upset about this. Now, Kershaw, when he was interviewed, and of course, he's not going to say anything, he said something else that upset me. And I'll tell you what that was in a second. But he's talking about his arm not being ready, which is what's happening right now, because I don't know if you see, but the number of injuries right now to the pitchers and the types of injuries they're having are deconditioning type injuries. They are injuries that should not have happened, because if they happened at an X number of pitch count, that means this pitcher didn't visit that pitch count enough to where he would be ready to pitch. So something's wrong with the way these guys are getting ready. And this shortened season BS. What were they doing in the off season? So I want to address that a little bit too, so coaches you can make plans for next season, because I have to get guys ready. That's my job. And my guys show up to spring training already having thrown 79 pitches. And these are my high school guys too. And most of them are starters. I don't expect the coach to get your arm ready. Whatever pattern the coach wants to use during that month, use that pattern, follow it, but don't let that be what builds you up, because sometimes that pattern isn't enough for you. So you take care of your business before you get there. But actually, that's a secondary point about this. The primary point I want to make, and this is what really upset me. So when they interview the coach, and I'm breaking a rule right now, because as most of you know, when I show pictures, unless I'm saying something good about a pitcher, I don't bring him up, especially a professional pitcher, because I know what they go through. And they're somebody's son. They are a man. They are a human. I don't want to beat them up, tear down their mechanics. I very rarely mention anything. But in this case, I want to mention it. So the coach is saying that he wanted to take care of the pitcher. And that is why he was doing something precautionary. And that's when I, in my head, hit the roof. Because Kershaw, he's in LA, he's surrounded by great doctors, great physical therapists, great athletic trainers, great everybody. He is constantly injured. His most recent injury in his forearm again. His most common injury is in his back. And if you watch him pitch, he has the worst deceleration in the major leagues. Well, maybe there's some closers that are worse, but they're only exposing themselves to maybe 15 hits like this. But his deceleration is off. And I know he is one of the best pitchers in baseball. And it scares me that kids might want to emulate him. But when he decelerates, his shoulders go lower than his hips. In order to do that, you have to round your back. When the back is round, that means your abs are contracting and your back muscles are stretching. The back muscles need to be contracted to support the bones of the spine, which house your nerves and your nervous system. So if you are not following through correctly with your back, you are stressing your back, and in a dangerous way. It not only affects the back, but it affects the hips. But guess what else it affects? Because your shoulders are lower than your hips, your arm cannot decelerate correctly. And watch his arm the next time you see him pitch. As he comes around to his right side, and Larry, I know you're a lefty, so you can see this clearly. His arm looks funny. It's not like it does something weird in the sense that he's not releasing the elbow. I think he does. It's hard to see, but it's coming from a weird angle because his shoulders are so low. Now, what this would usually improper deceleration will cause back problems, but a lot of times the deceleration isn't through the trunk. A lot of times improper deceleration is through the arm. But he's got the trunk and the arms are connected to the trunk. So when his shoulder's low, instead of his arm being able to come down diagonally, it looks funny. And so guess where the stress would be there? I mean, normally deceleration stress is in the rear deltoid and in the external rotators of the shoulder. There's a little hot spot back there. And that's from normal deceleration. And that shoulder decelerates the elbow. And then you've got, you put the brakes on correctly. Well, because his trunk is so low, his arm can't decelerate correctly. So now you've got the brakes not being put on from moment one. And yes, his stuff is filthy. And yes, he's a great pitcher, but he's out with injuries. So his forearm problem is from his deceleration. And now I know, my background is in structure and in posture. I was a rolfer. I've studied anatomy a million different ways. I'm a kinesiologist. We study movement. I have a sports medicine background as well. In a room of chiropractors or people who deal with movement, and maybe even surgeons, if they understand the concept of movement, we would all agree the back is supposed to be an extension when you do sports, when you perform. And his is not, and it hasn't been. And I predicted his injury privately to somebody years ago, his first injury, and they were shocked when I was right. And I've been right ever since. So, what bothered me about this, and I respect the major leagues, I know they're a business, but what I hated was hearing them say they care about him so much that he couldn't finish this game, but yet he's on the injury, he's on the IL, and nobody's addressing the issue that keeps returning him to the IL. Larry, do you get what I'm saying?
Absolutely. I wonder if, I don't know how many people have the knowledge or are educated enough to look or put the pieces together to come up with this conclusion like you have. I don't know that there are many people that could do that.
Well, I'm flattered. And I always say this. I know this. I know sometimes people say to me all the time, because people come up to me in the gym with problems and they're pain here. Players on the field will come up to me. If you study, I mean, this is why I say you coaches aren't expected to do this, but they've got people around them. If you study what I studied, and I'm saying physical therapists know this, they know about the back being an extension. And I've said this before too. Football knows about this. Guess what? Strength coaches who are good know about this. When you're doing a deadlift, to any of you strength coaches listening to me, when you're doing a deadlift and you're getting in position and you've rolled the bar on the floor, if your back isn't in extension with your chin up and your chest up, you can't lift from the hips. I've seen people grab the bar with a rounded back like Kershaw's back was, and they landed on the floor. I'm specifically remembering this. When you do a squat, you do not round your back at the bottom. The back is never rounded. This is a dangerous position. It's why when you're sitting in the car, you don't want to look like you're sitting in a bucket. You want a curve in the back. This creates the correct position of the pelvis. So this, as much as I'd love to think that I'm so much of a brainiac on this that I connect dots that no one else can connect, I swear I don't think anybody's looking. Now I do understand the concept, and Larry, and you're one that helped me get here. I finally understand why coaches are hesitant to change a pitcher if he's getting the job done. But it's a different story if he's getting it done and always hurting himself. So if he's getting it done, but he has no problems, I pray and keep my fingers crossed that lasts, even though I know he's going to have a career, he's going to top out somewhere. And I predicted this about many pitchers who right now we would go, where are they? And it's because they had predictable injuries in their hips and their back from their motion. In other words, they could only get away with it for so long because the body always wins. And I think every one of us who's ever had an injury from anything, whether it's something in your normal life, if something keeps hurting you, you have to look at how you're doing it. So this isn't just a call out for, hey, we got to make sure everybody does everything right. No, but when the body is talking to you repetitively and you can see the connection. So, like I said, Larry, I appreciate your saying that, but it's hard for me to believe nobody can connect the dots. But in case anybody's from the Dodgers organization is listening to this and you don't have anybody that's made this connection, and by the way, this is an easy fix.
Yeah.
And plus, he should have been, it's just like I tell my guys that throw pitches like split fingers, or a lot of pitchers call me. I get tons of calls from around the country and they tell me they have pain. I ask what type of the pitches they throw. If you're throwing some exotic pitches and it causes you, and your arm gets fatigued in between innings, you have to say, hey, I throw this pitch. This pitch can fatigue the forearm. Hey, when I'm not pitching, I got to strengthen my forearm. He is not being trained correctly in the sense of understanding the follow through. And guess what? He would be even better. But the deal is, like I said once before, if he's not available to pitch, then what good is he to a team? And if he keeps repeating the same injury. So my impassioned moment was, how can you care? It was like I was hearing something coming out of both sides of his mouth. The coaches, not the, well, the coach said it, and this isn't to pick on him, but on one hand, the top office tells you to pull him. On the other hand, you don't get that he's on the IL all the time and that the way he finishes is crazy. And so I was impassioned by that, not to mention, and maybe to reinforce why I do what I do with these podcasts and why I think we all need to do the best we can, especially when we're dealing with youth pitchers. And the first photo we're going to see is of a youth pitcher that a coach sent me. It happens to be his son. He just started pitching. And when I saw this, and it happened to be about a topic that I wanted to discuss anyway, I said, this is perfect. But I guess why I'm mentioning this is to inspire us when we have the kids in our hands. And if you've got a kid who's going to get drafted or signed, I tell all the parents, and these are the parents of the kids who've been entrusted to me for years. My philosophy is take care of them now so they can take care of themselves when they get there. There still is this myth that the coach is going to fix me. I have pain all the time, but the coach is going to fix me. The minor leagues are going to fix me. No, if you've got a kid who's pitching, take care of him now when he's in your hands. Even if you're going to be sending him on, if you're a coach like this coach is, I want this coach to take care of his son because he's going to eventually be turning him over to another coach who may not know what's happening. But we need to make sure that we're doing the best we can to instill the concepts of the way the body moves correctly. Because guess what? There's guys out there, there's really good pitchers out there that look correct when they're doing things. They don't look funky. They're not getting injured in the same kind of way. So and even when you do it correctly, you're going to get injured because sometimes, there's overuse or whatever. I mean, there's many things that pitchers do that I think put them at risk for not being able to continue doing their job. There's a lot of gimmicks and a lot of things out there that are unsafe. They just put too much of a load onto an arm that isn't getting the right recovery. But I think this message is to inspire everyone. One, please take a look at what I'm saying about Kershaw. And I wish nothing but for somebody to help him because he is not expected to know or understand this. So somebody needs to explain it, show him the upside. And also it has to be done and adjusted in a way that doesn't interfere with what he's already doing. But guess what? His arm's never going to be able to get through this if he doesn't decelerate correctly. And he has a deceleration issue. So I want everyone to just take a look at this. I want you to, when you watch football, I guess we're going to be watching football again on Sunday, the new league. Watch and see if the guy's on the line, if you see any weird back shapes or anything strange. No, these guys know how to get down into a 3-point start, and they know how to, stand and defend and do the things that they have to do, because in their case, if they don't move correctly, they could actually become paralyzed. But the rules of the bones are the same for everyone. So I just wanted to rant and rave a little bit about this, but also to inspire everyone to always try to when we're in a teaching level, yes, let's get him to throw strikes, but let's somebody else be concerned with how he's getting it done, not just what he's getting done. What do you think, Larry?
Very good. Very logical. It makes sense.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't know. I wouldn't. I mean, I couldn't explain what you just explained about Kershaw. I have no clue.
So when you watch him pitch and he goes down so low on the front side, you never thought that isn't the way everybody does it?
A little unorthodox. It doesn't look that bad live. I just looked at it. I was watching video when you were talking about it. It doesn't look that dramatic live when you're just watching. You slow things down, you pause, and you can see, what's going on. I was kind of watching what was going on with the video as you were talking, and it makes sense. Yeah.
Wow, you're good at multitasking. I love that. Yes, but see, here's the thing. You see that it's you, and I love what you just said. You saw it's unorthodox, but you don't get the connection between the injuries he's had, the inappropriate structural considerations that lead to why it's unorthodox. You're just like, oh, he's just like this, crazy pitcher who gets it done, right? And so those are the dots that you're talking about that aren't being connected. So anyway, well, there's my little inspirational talk, but not to leave the major leagues, because the topic we're going to be discussing today is also an interesting one. So the topic we're discussing today is, bottom line, we're going to be talking about the scapula. And the scapula are the shoulder blades, and the shoulder blades are part of the shoulder girdle. Now, this sounds like it's going to be the most boring topic in the world. But so what happened to DeGrom 2 weeks ago? So in November, I started planning that I wanted to address this topic with everyone because it's the key to velocity. It's the key to location. It's the key to protecting the shoulder. I mean, it's the trifecta. Understanding the way the shoulder blades work in the pitching motion is the trifecta of improving performance and keeping pitchers safe. And it's a really easy flaw to see. So I have been planning this. The problem is it's complicated. And I'm going to be dumbing it down. So for all you scientists out there that go, oh, well, you didn't mention this or that, I'm not dumbing it down in a disrespectful way. I'm trying to speak English when I teach it and not speak science. If I was sitting and teaching this to kinesiology students, which I had to do, I'd be able to use terminology and we could be over this thing in 5 minutes. But that's not what the language that any other humans have, only us people who study movement. So I've decided to do this topic. Then I get this wonderful video from one of my listeners, one of the coaches that listens. And then lo and behold, 2 days later, DeGrom goes on the IL with what's called a scapula stress reaction. So he's got a stress reaction in his shoulder blade. So I'm getting calls and emails and say, what the heck does the shoulder blade have to do with pitching? Which I thought, oh, this is so perfect because this is the universe telling me I need to jump into this topic. So we're going to be talking about this, and I hope that this makes it a little more interesting to listen to. But before we start talking about the shoulder blade, and then I'm going to bring in and show you all the possibilities because they're saying very little about DeGrom's injury. I check on it every day. It's an unusual way to describe it, a stress reaction. They're not really telling you what part of the shoulder blade. So I'm going to show you the implications. But what's interesting to me is this guy has pretty great mechanics. And I haven't seen him from all angles. And I have not frame by frame him to see exactly what's happening. Because somewhere in there is a possible reason. But from the clean eye, and my eye's pretty good, just looking at pitching, he's pretty clean. So when you have a stress reaction, that means that some muscle's pulling on the bone in a way it doesn't like, or the muscle is not strong enough to handle his triple digits. He throws over 100, right, Larry?
Yes, at times.
Yeah, like he's hit 103, 104.
Yeah, I don't know what he's touched, but I mean, I think, yeah, he's up around 100 a lot.
Yes, a lot and consistently. And this is why people think he's so great. And listen, he's an example of a guy who's throwing hard and his pitches are amazing. And he's getting it done. I mean, he's not a mess, right? When you look at him, you see clean, right?
Yes, very.
Yes, exactly. That's my side of the fence. I want it can be done clean, but you got to teach it from the beginning. And if you're not clean, that's why we got to get after our kids. There's no reason why a kid should be sloppy. We can teach him how to do it correctly. So before we jump into everything, so we're all going to be experts on DeGrom's injury, and then I'm going to talk about the role. And then also at the end, I'm going to give you some fabulous drills that I designed a few months ago to work with teaching how to teach this and how to get the feel. And I can tell you, it's going to be fantastic. So let's open up, Larry. Oh, go ahead and open up the first photo. And for the listeners, you're going to have to be watching this from YouTube, Angel Borrelli pitching, in order to be able to see what we're talking about, because I think you will get lost on this. So anyway, so Larry, this is a 12-year-old pitcher that is the son of a coach, and he is just starting to pitch. He hasn't even been interested in baseball. And he's actually a pretty good pitcher. I was just listening to some stats on him. So he's been getting the job done no matter what. And by the way, when you see a pitcher who everything looks wrong about him, but he gets the job done. And if you want, closers are a perfect example. You know, they put him in the pen to keep him from not being too wild for too long. You've got what you have in your hands is a kid or a pitcher that's such a gamer that he's going to get it done one way or another. And what we hope for is he gets it done without abusing his own body. But you can get it done the wrong way. But remember, I'm on the side of let's see if we can teach pitchers to do it the right way, especially when they're really young. So what I did is I'm not doing the purpose of this talk today, everyone, is not to do a full analysis of this pitcher's motion. But it was so easy to see the flaw that I want to talk about, and it's going to be easy for you to see this. So when the coach sent me this video, he said, he used to be really bad. He's much better now. He said, however, I do know that he's leading with the elbow. So if you look over to the photo that's on the far right, you will see that you're able to see the pitcher's elbow, and he hasn't really started to come forward yet with his body. So what you see is his arm is visible in a way that usually should not be visible at this point of the motion. Leading with the elbow is usually something we use to describe when the pitcher is facing the hitter and he's in max external rotation. And so this is where, and if you've been listening to me and you've listened to my podcast, you know this position. His shoulder is fully stretched and the ball is behind him. He's at a 90-degree angle. It looks like his arm is in the shape of a letter L and it's laying backwards. The ball is facing the sky. And leading with the elbow is that the pitcher, instead of using his shoulder to bring the hand forward, he brings his elbow forward first, like a quarterback. And of course, you know, there's many podcasts I've done on comparing quarterback to pitching. So, former podcasts that I've done with leading with the elbow would, if you're not clear on this. And so that's usually when we talk about leading with the elbow. But that laxity in through the stability of the shoulder girdle, which is the shoulder blade system, can get loose sooner in the motion. And in this kid, he happened to get loose sooner in the motion, which means that, and for everyone who tries to do troubleshooting, anything that if a pitcher is off at this phase of the motion, the way he throws the ball will be off because it's very unusual to be able to self-correct in the middle of the motion once you get angles and arm parts and body parts into an odd position. because remember, the whole motion takes less than 2 seconds. And also remember, you're stepping and turning. So when you have an arm and you're still looking at this photo where you see that the shoulder joint has let go of its stretch, and I will be showing you photos soon to explain this even more thoroughly. You see the elbow coming forward, what you know is that you are probably going to see a delivery that is not safe or not done with the shoulder. And in fact, yes, as I played the video through, his throw was not being done from the shoulder. It was being done from the elbow, which means that if he throws hard, he's throwing hard from the elbow. He's probably going to have decent location with the way he's throwing, but his velocity will have an upside to it. And particularly because he's just started pitching, we want to get on top of this right away. And I have a personal interest in wanting to help this coach help his son, because you coaches give everything, and it's time that somebody gives you some help. So now what we see, go over to the photo on the left, and this is what is so kind of cool in one way. When you look at this picture right here, other than the fact that I see a timing problem, because his right arm right now, let's define this for a minute. If he had a clock behind him, a clock face, his arm looks at like it's at 11:30. That arm to be at 11:30 when his foot hasn't touched down yet means his arm is too fast. So when you see that his arm is too fast, and the way you see it's too fast is that it should be at around 10. That would be perfect. Anything below 10 starts to get, so if he's at 9, 9:30, it starts to get into a little stress in the labrum area. So we don't want that. 10 is perfect. 11 is good. But those are positions of the arm that he should be in when he touches down. Now look at the middle photo. He has touched down there. His foot's not flat. It's not supposed to be. It's whatever he touches down with. So that is stride foot contact in the middle. And you can see he's right at 12 there. And when analysts look at film and we do video analysis, and that's if you're formally trained in it, and I mean trained in not just analysis, but in knowing the definitions of the phases of the motion, the stride phase ends when the front foot makes contact with the ground for the first time. Not when it's flat, when it touches down. He's touching down with his toe, part of the ball of the foot. That's fine. But look at his arm. It's at 12. So the first place we go is we stop right here and we look. And so I say, oh, his arm is ahead of his lower body because his arm is at 12. So then I go to the left and I look at this frame and I go, okay, well, yeah, he came out of the glove pretty quickly. And he wasn't even close to touching down. So, of course, as we move to the middle frame, we're going to see that his arm moved more because his legs were moving. So he's keeping the ball moving, which he is supposed to do. Now his foot is touched down and he's at 12. So his arm is too soon. It's too early. You don't want to touch the stride. You want to touch the fact that his arm is coming out of his glove too quickly. And for somebody who doesn't play baseball or is just starting to learn how to pitch, let's say he played baseball, but he is new to pitching. Everything in baseball is fast out of the glove. So when you're working with a youth pitcher, expect to see exactly what you're seeing here. This is what you're going to see at 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12, especially if they play another position. So this guy gets going. Let's go back to the left. Now, what's cool about this is he's being nice and deceptive. He's got the ball at least behind his body, but it is up a little too high in the first frame, so he's externally rotated too much. He came out of the glove, boom. But what I want you to notice is look at the nice straight line he's on. And I also want you to notice that you only see his chest from the side. This is a critical feature of the stride phase. We do not want any part of the backside of the body coming towards the plate yet. And this is critical to understanding the arm flaw that we're going to talk about. That is a predominant flaw when an injury occurs in a pitcher's shoulder, in a pitcher's elbow, but also when you can eradicate the flaw, big things happen with the pitch, not just location, but velocity. So I always want to point out what's good. So on the far left, if that ball was more facing 10, so his forearm is the arm of the clock and he's at 10, with the direction of his body and with his arm there, we would have almost a perfect stride foot contact position. And I also want you to notice his foot is almost down. But what I want you to notice is look at just the upper body of the far left frame. If his foot was down, that would be probably a B plus stride foot contact position. But what I want to show you is this pitcher knows how to keep himself sideways. Now, as we move to the middle frame, well, his arm was a little fast for that position, so we know it's going to have gone more. His foot is now down. Now, I want you to look at this. This right here is, you can see his chest starting to turn forward. So he has in his head, actually, his chest is still almost sideways. I said that incorrectly. Sorry. His chest is still sideways. So he's still maintaining the rules of the stride phase, which is he's sideways. Look at his belt buckle. It's still facing sideways. And by the way, I have to give kudos to this coach. This is a coach who not only is left-handed, he is catching his son and filming his son at the same time. I mean, whoever heard of this? So I said, I am going to do all I can to help this coach fix his little son here. Because this guy, I go, he's good. He's good. But anyway, so we've got the kid now. He's in his stride foot contact. He's all the way sideways. But look what we see. We see his arm coming forward. Can you see that, Larry?
Yes, absolutely.
You can see his upper arm. It's just starting to break loose. And I want you to remember the term break loose because I'm going to explain all this further. So his arm has started to, I'm going to say, dissociate from his trunk. You want to think of the trunk as your car. And you want to think of your shoulder joint, which is the arm. The upper arm bone fits into the body and it's a joint. That's your tire. And you want the tire right in the wheel well going with the car, right? And the trunk, so it's part of the trunk. Now, I don't know if you've ever been driving down the street or a freeway and you saw a tire come loose and it starts spinning in weird directions. And the next thing it comes loose and it rolls across the freeway. I've seen that more than once. That's what a quote unquote looking like he's leading with the elbow, like right out of the gate. His arm has gotten loose from the front. So in other words, he's lost his stretch. And I'm going to repeat, everybody, you'll see photos that depict all of this. So what we have here is we have somebody he's striding out and now his brain goes, it's time to turn. And instead of starting to turn his body, he's starting to bring his arm forward too quickly because this kid is thinking it's time to throw the ball. He's not thinking it's time to turn my body. Now, the way I can prove that is, so here's the middle photo depicts the end of the stride phase. He has made contact with the ground. The end of the stride phase means that now the shoulders should be rotating backward and his right hip, where if he had jeans on, there'd be a pocket facing sideways now. We would want to start seeing in the next frame that pocket coming forward and his arm going backward. So as we go to the next frame, we see that, yes, his hip is starting to rotate forward. You can tell that you can see his back leg coming forward. He's on the ball of the foot, means his brain's telling him to turn. He's not turning his trunk yet, but he did not hang on to his arm and it's coming forward even more. So he's not going into any external rotation. He is just bringing the elbow inward as if he were going to throw a football. Do you see that, Larry?
Yes, and also see the. I mean, it seems like if you think of his body in two sections, his lower body and his upper body, that it's all turning at the same time when it shouldn't do that. Is that right,
Well, he's not really turning. I mean,
or beginning to turn?
yes, he's turning. Well, we don't know what's happening yet because his right hip has not turned enough.
Okay.
So his right hip is, so if you look at the middle photo,
Hmm.
and these are 3 frames in a row, by the way. If you look at the middle photo, you can see that you can only see his belt buckle, and you can't see the top of his thigh. You're looking at it sideways.
Hmm.
But in the next frame, and you look at the foot, he is starting. If you look at the kneecap in the middle frame is sideways. In the next frame, it's turning. That means his hip is starting to turn.
Gotcha.
However, he should have a little more turning going on in that pelvis because he's not going to be able to make it all the way square. But what's notable is that, in a sense, and this is another way to look at what I think you're seeing, is he pretty much, if you look at him from his armpits down, his body from the middle frame to the next one doesn't look very different, but his arm is way different. So, in other words, what do we see going towards the plate the most right now? The
His
arm.
arm.
And the arm is not supposed to go towards the plate at this point. What we need to see is, let's go way back to the very first photo here on the left. He should have the arm from that position, that arm there, where we don't see the arm. We should still not be seeing the arm as he's starting to rotate forward. He should be moving the arm backward, which between the first and second frame, do you see how he is moving it? I mean, he went from 11:30 to 12.
Mhm.
Now, he needs to go from 12 back to 1, back to 2, which, if you look at his hand, it looks like his hand somehow did start moving backward. But it did that because the upper arm bone folded onto the lower arm bone, the forearm folded onto the upper arm bone because he brought the elbow forward. So he actually is coming across his body with his shoulder joint instead of the shoulder joint rolling backwards so that he could get stretch. Okay, so let me remind you about pitching for a second before we go on to now to really understand what happened. So, what's happening here? So, when the coach wrote me the email and he said, I see he's leading with the elbow. Well, if somebody thought you were leading with the elbow, if this was a clean leading with the elbow situation, we would be saying, well, he lost the stretch in front of his shoulder. He shouldn't have let the arm start coming forward. But what I saw, because it's what I do for a living, is I said he lost his shoulder blades. So his shoulder blades, again, the scapula, it's AE when it's plural, it's scapula when it's single. He lost his right scapula positioning, which allowed the entire shoulder joint to move forward. So when I'm looking at this picture, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to teach him how to get his shoulder blade in position, which then pulls the arm back. So the importance of this for everyone, and I hope after this session, and I know this is going to be one of these smoke coming out of your ears podcasts, but if you understand this, and if you listen and then just go back and look and then feel the drills I give you, it's going to be lights on, lights out. It's going to be awesome. So the shoulder blade is the culprit here, not the arm. And you can try to fix that arm all day. You can go up to the elbow and push it back and do this. But if this kid doesn't understand, he's not going to be able to keep the arm in position. Once he knows the arm can't come forward first, he will bring his body forward. In other words, his brain's going, we got to go towards the plate, but his brain's connected to his hand because he's not a pitcher and he doesn't understand. guess what? You don't go towards the plate yet. You step and turn slowly in pieces. Then you go towards the plate. I'm going to throw the ball. Do you see that?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, and that is because so he has lost his shoulder blade. So now let's go to the next photo, and then we're going to talk, and then this will all start to become more clear. And now what we have to do is I have to go into a little bit of anatomy, and then I've got some video that's going to make this all come to life. Okay. Do you have the second one up? And for all you listeners, you don't have to open up anything because my wonderful editor has everything going when you need it. So do you see this here?
Mm-hmm. Shoulder blade.
Okay. Do you see the shoulder blades? Mm-hmm. Exactly. So I'm going to call them shoulder blades because it's easier for everyone to understand. The shoulder. So here's what I want you to see. So we are looking at two joints right now. People don't understand this. They don't get this. It feels crazy. We are looking at a body from the back side. So his face is, we're looking at the back of his head. Down the middle of those two blades is where the spine runs. And the bones would be right down the middle. And then there's muscles connecting on that side, that straight side. There's muscles connecting those blades to the spine. Now, this is the most critical thing I want you to see. Now, I've talked about this before. So I want you to go over to the arm. So the arm, the top of the arm, you see it's a ball. That's why I always call it a tire. It's a ball. And I want you to see that it is sitting very close into the shoulder blade. Now, these are the bones. So you're going to see a space there. But in our structure, that's where the labrum is. There's cartilage in there. So the way I want you to see this is that the shoulder, the arm bone makes up the shoulder joint, and the space in between is filled with cartilage, and it goes along the corner of that shoulder blade. And there's names for all this, but I'm not going to use them because I don't want you guys to blow up too soon here. Just know that arm bone sits right in there. So it's part of the scapula in the sense that it has an intimate relationship with it, just like the tire on your car. It's a tire. The car's the car. But there's things underneath it that connect that tire and make it part of a unit. Do you get that, Larry?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay. And since we're here, see how that bone looks like it's sitting on top of the shoulder?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
See that bone that's going across? And it's like a funny bone.
Mm-hmm.
You know how everybody gets supraspinatus impingement?
Right.
Yeah. See that? That's where the muscle lies, and it comes down into that bone. And see how those bones are all crushed together there?
Uh-huh.
That is how people get impinged, because that's the spacing we have. And that's a rotator cuff issue. Now, I also want you to notice that, and this is important, you want to notice that the top of the humerus, which is your arm bone, it's hanging down, is a ball. And I want you to notice how big that is. And I want you to look at the shoulder blade where it sits into. We're seeing space there, but there's tissue there, trust me. Notice how small it is. That's why we have such an unstable joint. The hip joint has a similar kind of configuration with the pelvis and the leg, but it's completely opposite. The place our legs sit is small compared to where it fits into our hip joint. That's why our hip joints are very stable. But you see this here, this is literally, and this is the term they use when you learn it in school, it is a golf ball sitting on a tee. That's the size differential. That is why the muscles have to do a lot of work to keep that ball in place. And by the way, the shoulder joint, and when I talk about the joint, I'm talking about this ball that you see fitting into this perfect socket on the blade. That is one joint. We haven't talked about the shoulder blade yet. That's one joint. That joint moves faster than any other joint on the body. That is why we want you to use that joint to pitch because it's designed, it moves forward, it's moving towards the hitter. And when we have that arm bone moving towards the hitter, now just picture that arm coming straight up to the side and then roll it forward towards the hitter. That motion there goes like, I think 8,000 degrees per second compared to like an elbow, which the max is about 4,000 degrees per second. Don't quote me on those exact numbers, but that's kind of a way to understand it. So we want you to use that shoulder joint. Now, there's a second joint we're looking at, and that's the shoulder girdle. Now, I want you to pop yourself to what the front of this would look like. You see that real thin bone? We see two. There's a thin bone on the back side of this. It would be on the anterior side of the body. You see those two thin bones there?
Yes.
Okay. Those are your clavicles.
Okay.
Okay. The clavicle, and those are your neck bones. Okay. And if you go to your neck right now and go right under your throat, you're going to feel two big round bones there, right?
Yep.
One on each side, and they get bigger and they get hurt. And when you hit it, it hurts like you know what. It's a very thin bone. That's the ligament that attaches this whole system to your spine. It's the only bony attachment to the spine for this girdle. That's why we say the shoulder girdle floats on top of the ribs. That clavicle there, okay, so that represents the front. That clavicle plus the shoulder blades you're looking at make up the shoulder girdle joint. This is an entirely different joint. So the shoulder blade is part of the shoulder girdle joint, just like you have a wrist joint and an elbow joint. You have a shoulder girdle joint, and you have the shoulder joint. And you see how intimately they are related.
Yes.
Okay. Now, just so everybody knows, we don't know what DeGrom did to his bone, but look at the right one. He has a stress reaction there. So let me just show you, and then I'll point this out when we're actually looking at a human being. So you can see how that arm bone needs to stay in that socket. So the muscles that work around the arm bone to keep it in the socket are all those famous names you hear when they say rotator cuff. Those are the bones that are situated. If you were building a building and you had two bones like this and you had to keep them together, well, that's the way your body's built. There's certain muscles that are going to secure that bone onto the scapula because we know that bone has to sit in that small little space. Those are called the shoulder joint muscles. They're actually working on the joint of the shoulder, and your rotator cuff muscles are the deepest layer of that. And we all know on the front, we've got the chest. That's a shoulder joint muscle, and we've got the lat. That's why when a pitcher pitches, we want him to use his chest and his lat. The rotator cuff muscles go along for the ride. They're struggling to keep this arm bone in place. That's why when we have a pitcher pitch, we want it to make sense for the body because those rotator cuff muscles are struggling to keep that big ball in place. Okay, now let's leave that joint. Now, in the rest of this, so we've got these blades. Well, everybody right now, no matter what you're doing, and if you're driving, this is the only exercise I'm going to give you that you have permission to do. Squeeze your blades together. Okay, that is the blades coming together. The muscles that do that, they work from the blade into the spine. And when you shrug your shoulders up and down, shrug them up, those are muscles that are up on top that lift the shoulder blades up. So when you go, I don't know, and you shrug your shoulders, that's your shoulder girdle moving. But guess what goes with it? The shoulder joint goes with it. It's not doing it, but it goes with it. So the blades come in together, they move up, go down to the tip at the bottom of that blade, the little round part, they go down. They also rotate. These bones are amazing. You're going to see all of that in the next film. So let's talk about DeGrom's injury. We've got muscles around the shoulder joint that are laying over this bone. but they act on the shoulder joint. They don't act on the shoulder blades. We've got muscles over the shoulder blades. They act on the shoulder blades. He's got a stress fracture. The reason why I keep looking it up is, well, where is he fractured? If he has a stress fracture on the blade itself in the middle, which is, if he does, that means he's really throwing hard. That's one type of a stress reaction. Excuse me, he doesn't have a fracture, he has a reaction. So he could be having a reaction to the shoulder girdle or to the shoulder joint, because all they said was they didn't mention the joint. They just mentioned the bone, and the bone is involved in two different joints. Do you understand that, Larry?
Yes, I do.
Okay,
Yes.
now when you see how these bones work, so on our little friend, our little pitcher, he needed to be bringing those blades in together so that when those blades move towards the center of his body, this right blade moving in, it would take the joint with it and he would have the arm still back. But instead, he dissociated that bone from the blade, left the blade there, and put the arm forward. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yes. I'm walking
Okay.
through it as you.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
doing it
Yeah.
as you explain it.
I know you are. I know you are. And so, yeah, now this is all going to make more sense. So now we're going to look at a little video here. So now here's one of my pitchers who is doing actions of the shoulder blade. They do more than this. So everybody out there, don't be writing me letters. I'm aware of that. So now this is going to keep repeating. And if it doesn't on your computer, Larry, it will on YouTube. So what I want you to do is put it on repeat because I'm going to talk about this.
Okay.
So let me take this with, let's talk about pitching. So the pitcher's arms, he brings the glove down, he separates his arms. The first thing he does, he gets to the shoulder. So if you notice, he's in neutral right now. Can you see the blades coming in together?
Yes.
The blades come together, and now because the blades also rotate up over the head, that's called upward rotation. His shoulder blades and his shoulder are going up over the head. What this is showing is what the back side of the body does when it's only doing the motions that are upward and downward. And when the blades come together there, that is called retraction. Right there, when the arms are up at 90 degrees, you see that there's a contraction of muscles. It brings the blades into the spine, and that is called retraction. As his arms go up and over his head, that's called upward rotation. Now, what I want you to notice from this before we go to the next, and the rest are still shots, I want you to notice that the arm, the shoulder joint you just saw in your head, you see how it's staying with the blade?
Mm-hmm.
There's an intimate relationship between the blade and the shoulder joint. For every 2 degrees the blades move, the arm moves like 1 degree. So that's what we have.
Interesting.
In fact, you know what? I think I said that backwards. I'm actually going to be checking notes here. I think I just said something backwards. Yeah, it's 2 degrees of shoulder joint movement to 1 degree of shoulder girdle movement. See, I knew when I said it, it sounded wrong. So for every degree that the arms move, the shoulder joint is going to move as well.
Twice as much.
So, the shoulder joint moves twice. Very good, Larry. You're a numbers
can't
guy.
get much by me.
That's
Come
right.
on now. Come on.
Oh, that's right. Let me get this. 1, 2, 3. That's an out. Okay. 1, 2. That's innings.
Right.
Okay. I got it. So there's an intimate relationship. So if you have a sport where you're using your shoulder joint for the power part, you better understand how to use your upper back. And the other thing I want you to notice here is all of that is moving really easily because remember the bone configuration you just saw? Remember I said it's floating?
Mm-hmm.
It's floating on top of the ribs. So when we say to someone in athletics, lift your ribs, why are we doing that? Because it positions that system perfectly. So picture those 2 white bones you just saw. Picture them sitting on top of perfect posture. You see how balanced they are?
Hmm.
Now, if you slump forward or contract forward, those blades move up and they start rolling towards the front of your body. Now,
Angel, I have a question. You told me to stop you,
okay.
and it's
No, I'm
not something
glad.
I don't understand. It's not something I don't know. There are a lot of people I've heard or I've listened to. It seems that more of a new thing now with a lot of people teaching the delivery. They teach people to pinch their scapula, to pinch their shoulder blades together when they're throwing, and that always seemed odd to me. I always thought it was I always felt it was a non-teach that
Mm-hmm.
if you do it right, if you lift your arms properly, it happens and you don't have to teach it. Maybe, but so it seems like I'm just watching the video when he raises his arms and he gets to 90. He didn't so-called pinch his scaps or whatever. They did it on their own. So am I right, or do you think I'm right in teaching somebody to do that? That could teach maybe an improper arm path. Like it's mechanically not sound. It's I don't know. I don't know that we need to teach it. What do you think?
Well, I think the next time I see you, I'm going to give you a gold star and put it on your
Hey, all
forehead.
right, all
All right. You
right,
know
all
what?
right.
Yeah, yeah. Today you're on it today.
Hot today.
Yeah, exactly. So here's what you're saying. So first of all, you are 100% correct that when you move correctly with your bones in position, which is why I mentioned, look at his bones. His skeleton was in perfect position. Everything happens correctly because it's the way the body's designed to move. And anything in athletics is a form of normal movement. Okay. It's a form of it. It could be exaggerated, but it's something your body does. You're not asking it to do something it doesn't do. Now, the risk you run, and here's what you saw, the risk you run when you're asking someone to overdo something. The word pinch is scary. What's really happening is there's a contraction. And when the contraction happens normally, you've got the right amount of structural integrity or alignment. So to tell someone to overdo it, you're actually asking him to possibly restrict normal motion because he's contracting too hard. However, sometimes in a sports skill, part of teaching sports movements, this is an interesting concept. It's not so much you're teaching the body to do a movement. A lot of times you're training it to not do certain movements so that you can do the movement you're trying to do. And what you are trying to do, for example, with our little picture at the beginning, we don't want his shoulder blade to slide out. He's pulling it out. So he has to be taught how to hold it. And so what I tell my pitchers to do, and we're going to be seeing this on photos here, actually how to find it and to maintain it, but not to overdo it. But the concept that these teachers are teaching is honestly on the right path. And it could get the thought across, but it also could cause cramping. In fact, if someone overdoes it, they'll go, oh, and there's bursa that lie under the shoulder blade. And when pitchers get sore in that bursa under the blade, it is a nightmare. I mean, I don't know if you've ever slept funny and you have a weird thing and that's your shoulder blade. Oh, you don't know. You call it the upper back, but it's really the blade because that blade's floating. So there's all kinds of systems under there that allow that. So the pinching is in, and I've said this before about coaches. You usually are on the right track. You may not have the language, but they're absolutely correct. What they're saying is to keep the scapula in place, which keeps the arms from going forward too quickly. So open up the next photo because it's going to be actually talking about what you just asked. It's a still shot. Okay. So we're seeing two frames here, right? So there he is with his arms at his side. And you can actually see his spine. It almost looks like a white line down the two. And you can actually see muscle development from his blades to his spine. And that's because he trains those muscles to be strong. Because if they're not strong enough, that blade, which takes a beating, can get stress reactions i.e. DeGrom, or it can become weakened to where he starts having kind of what we call a dysfunctional type of scapular movement. In fact, for any of you fathers who have brought your boys in that are pitchers or hitters, that you go to a doctor or a chiropractor, anybody worth their weight in gold is going to have them take a shirt off, and they're going to look at the scapula and they're going to see, are they even? Are they next to each other? Is one higher or one lower? And then they're going to ask them to do actually probably the movement you saw in the prior video, where you're moving up and down, because that's showing how those bones are tracking. And you're not going to believe how bad it can look when you have a dysfunctional scapula. And there's all kinds of names for this. So if you do any further study about this, or if you have anybody in the medical world and you just say, hey, talk to me about the scapula, they'll say, oh, there's a dyskinesis and blah, blah, blah. It's very complicated. But the important thing is to understand that this part of the body is critical in pitching. So now we look at the left and we see that that's neutral. Now, all I did was ask him to move his shoulders up. I didn't say retract, do this, do that. He is right now retracted. And you're right, Larry, that's what you saw. It is normal. Now, why is this normal, and why didn't I have to make a correction? Number one, he's standing up straight, so his ribs are propped up. If you look at the picture on the left, picture the white bones you saw in the first photo. You can actually see sort of the configuration. When he lifted his arms up, and by the way, the first place a pitcher has to get is to the arms at 90 degrees, correct?
Correct.
Now, when you come up from the side, not only do you have a muscle in the middle of the shoulder that's designed to move the arms up along the side, it's designed to do it, the middle deltoid. That's pretty much all it does. Its fibers are designed to pull the arm straight up. Not only do you have a muscle that pulls the arm up, but you've got a shoulder blade that houses the shoulder joint, and the shoulder joint's the major player in pitching. And the blades come in together, which means they are now holding the arm to the side. We want the arms to the side because you can't see it in this photo. But if he bends his right arm to put it into that perfect stride foot contact position, you're not going to see the ball. So when pitchers take their arms and as they're going to lift, they push one to the front, they push their glove arm forward, they bring their pitching arm backward. You see how crazy that is? Then you get weird scapular positioning. And then you have to run the risk that shoulder joint is not going to be exactly where we want it when he starts to make his turn. And that would be what we saw in the photo of our youth pitcher. He didn't have his arm, his shoulder blade didn't do this. You see what I'm saying? So,
Yes.
okay, and we're going to see more photos. So you are absolutely right. Overkill would be bad because it would restrict motion. But if you move correctly, I always say use your bones. If your bones are in the right place, the muscles know what to do. Now, because he's a pitcher turns, he's got forces that he has to deal with because arms want to fly out when you're turning. And they want to fly in certain ways when you're off balance or you're on one leg or you're going downhill. So, yes, we have to sometimes apply more force during the motion so things don't fly around. So, in that way, a pitcher knowing how to maintain the normal contraction is the critical piece. Not so much pinching, but the word pinch, Larry, and to all my listeners, please use the word contract. People know what that means. Contract it, but don't overdo it. I tell the pitcher, I tell him squeeze, now let it go. Like in this position, squeeze, let it go. Now integrate it and maintain it, but don't overdo it. They get that. By the way, the drills that I have to help teach this are going to make all this simple. So let's go to the next photo here. Now, how are you doing so far, Larry?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great.
Okay.
Yeah, just to touch on, I've had pitchers I think that have been taught to kind of squeeze, pinch or whatever, and to me I compare it to them pulling back a bow and arrow. It's like it's how their arms work when they separate their glove to get in that position, and it seemed wrong from the beginning, and then I just always thought it was a non-teach, if you will.
Yes. If you got a biomechanics report, if you had somebody analyze at a biomechanics lab, they're going to have all the positions in pitching. And one of the positions they're going to look at is that stride foot contact position, because that's an analytical position. But they're not just going to look at the arm angle like I was talking about today. They're going to look at a component that is called horizontal B as in boy duction. And they're going to measure that component. And in some very modern books, it could be called horizontal extension. It is not correct. It's horizontal abduction, but you never know. Someone might use that terminology. What they're measuring is how far back, like you're saying, pulling a bow, how far back the arms are, because if the pitcher doesn't have enough of that, that means his scapula are not retracted enough to hold the front of the body back. Because remember, you're supposed to be stretching the front of the body, and you set your body up for that from moment one so that you are correct. And that would be pinching. So if you put your arms up at your side in a T position, you're going to have the scapula be inward, just like they were on the prior photo. Now, bring your arms way back, like you're trying to reach behind you, but don't lower them and don't bend them. Now you are horizontally abducted. Now just take your pitching arm, move it in position to that 10 o'clock position. Look over your left shoulder, or for you, right shoulder. I'm doing it as a lefty. And you see how your arms, you can't see them out of your peripheral vision, right? You're way back.
Hmm.
Okay, that is horizontal abduction. Why do we want that? Because we are stabilizing the shoulder joint by stabilizing the shoulder blades. Okay, does that make sense?
Yep, absolutely.
All this is going to come together in a better way. And I can't wait to hear your questions when we get to the drill. Now, go to the next photo.
Okay.
So, this is where we're talking about the two positions. Now, I have him doing this with both arms because it's a little more dramatic. So we already saw that when he came up to 90 degrees, the shoulder blades came together, correct? They contracted.
Correct.
And the name of that movement, that action, is called retraction. And we're still talking about the back of the body, because I'm going to give you a secret about the shoulder blades that's going to add velocity. This is what's so awesome. We haven't gotten there yet, but we're almost there. So in the left photo, that is the position of the arm when he's in stride foot contact. Okay. So you see the position of, he's a righty. So look at his right arm. You can look at his left one. So that is the way it looks when your arm is up at 90. We already saw that. And now his arm is bent. Now I want you to notice that his shoulder is connected to his shoulder blade. Okay. And his shoulder blades are retracted. You can see that, right?
Hmm.
Okay. Now, in the frame on the right, I asked him to go into external rotation.
Okay.
Now, we're in the middle of this guy's off season. You can see where we work. You see that kind of balance structure?
Yep.
That's what you want for your pitchers. This is why this guy's never injured. So what he did to externally rotate, and I didn't tell him, he just knows how to do it. He lifted up in the front. He externally rotated the shoulder joint. And while he was doing that, he allowed his scapula to retract even more.
Hmm.
Now, this position here is the position that you want the pitcher in when he's facing the hitter getting ready to accelerate. what you have is full retraction of the blade. And by the way, because both sides float, I want you to think of the shoulder blade as a teeter-totter. So if at some point the glove arm does something really weird, like it goes way up or way out or really crazy, it could affect the right shoulder blade. But for now, we're going to assume kind of normal motion where one side isn't making the other side do something weird. So when he's facing the hitter, the glove arm will be down at his side and pulled in. And by the way, when the glove arm is pulled in, that blade on his glove arm is retracted. So you're going to have that same, you can feel that, right?
Yes.
Okay. That's why you want to teach good glove arms. Glove arms increase the rotation and they bring the stability back. So now here's what I want everyone to get. Everyone, please get this. When that shoulder blade is retracted like that, you've got muscles that are big and strong working on that. When you've got your shoulder in external rotation, which is the front of his body is stretched. Remember, the purpose of the pitching motion is to arrive to the acceleration point completely stretched in the front of the body. That shoulder, do you see how stable that looks, Larry?
Yeah, very.
That's because his shoulder blade is retracted, which pulled his arm backward. When you pull the arm back, the front stretches. He's in external. Now, picture those bones again, the white bones at the beginning. Picture that ball. That ball turned perfectly backwards towards us, sitting in that socket, perfectly held, with the rotator cuff muscles doing their job and not being pulled in a weird way because his arm's up too high or his arm's too low. It's perfectly at 90. This is why we say 90 is magic, because if you saw, that was the 90-degree kind of angle position on the bones. You've got the shoulder blade stabilizing the entire upper back. You've got the shoulder joint being stabilized by the shoulder blade. Now, this guy, as he goes into the moving forward movement, which is acceleration, he's not only going to have the help of all that musculature now releasing the arm forward, he's got perfect position for speed. But guess what? There's a nice friendly muscle on the inside of the blade that when that blade comes out, because he knows how to use it, he's going to use that huge muscle along with his shoulder joint muscles to accelerate the ball. And he's going to have full acceleration and power because he's using that whole upper right quadrant in the correct way. So from this position here, you've got everything on stretch in the front and the ball is delivered. And you've held the arm back during rotation. Now I'm going to show you and explain that more. So far, does that make sense?
Absolutely. And then I think it shows how important your front arm is, your glove arm.
Oh my God.
I mean, I can think of a lot of people. I mean, there's guys that have been successful and, get by with it, I guess. But man, I've seen a lot that can't and that don't because the glove arm doesn't work right. So it's good.
That is for you to make that connection, Larry. I love it. And this is what we started talking about in this show. Guys get it done. They get it done in crazy ways. But like this young youth pitcher, are we going to, and I've said this before, it's like teaching your kid how to drive. Do you take him out and say, okay, now I'm going to teach you how to completely space out while you drive, so that when you arrive home, you realize you weren't thinking about anything, but you were worrying about something that happened. And you're like, oh my God, how did I get here? You teach consciousness. You teach awareness. You teach feel. And if you can feel this, I mean, can you see how that right arm on this picture could explode?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Could absolutely explode forward. Now, the deal is, because all of this is intricate, but you have to remember, we're dealing with the top level of the body. That is why if you do weird things with your knee lift, If you do weird things in your stride, if you land in a weird place, you are going to disallow this because your body will be trying to find balance. Remember, this looks perfect here because his ribs are perfect. His ribs are perfect because his low back is perfect. His low back is perfect because his pelvis is just sitting there perfectly square and his legs are underneath it. It's really easy to look perfect like this. But guess what? If you want to throw triple digits, you know that to do that, you have to have fire on the inside. There's a lot more that goes into throwing triple digits than just what happens on a muscular level. You got to know how to find it. But guess what? The way you find it is by feeling the way muscles work so powerfully when you actually do it right. And that gives you the fire to keep wanting to do it. So that's the key. So at that age of our little youth pitcher, we want him to learn how to do things right, especially because he's new to it and he's going to be fired up when he feels this stuff. So let's go to the next photo and see what we've got here. Now, the reason why I'm showing this is I wanted you to see where the errors occur in the pitching motion. The error does not occur with this hitter, but this is how it should look. And I'm bringing it from the back because I wanted you to see. So as you can see, he's on the far left. He's actually in the middle of his rotation phase. So you can see how the right arm is very close in towards the spine. The shoulder blade is very close to the spine, correct? You
Yes.
see that? And his shoulder is going into external rotation during the motion, just like it was in the prior photo. Also, this is a good time to talk about the glove arm. So here he is. You see where his glove arm is. And yes, the glove arm is not going to be in the same position, but see how he's pulling in and you can see it's getting close to the spine. And if you look in the middle frame, see how it's real close to the spine?
Yes.
And you see how the right shoulder blade has not left its position. In fact, he's increased his retraction.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, on the next photo, this is where you see how his arm is behind him. His body's almost square, but you can see his upper arm.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you see that. So it's behind him. That is what we call horizontal. He's externally rotating, but he also has a degree. There are muscles that are pulling that arm behind him as well. And that's what we call horizontal abduction. That youth pitcher, if we were looking at him in this angle, you would not see his right arm at all.
Right.
The arm should be the last thing that comes through. The chest comes through first. And the chest muscle works on the shoulder joint. Now, what you see here happening is you see this pitcher using his shoulder girdle and all his external rotators to keep the body back, which means he's stretching in the front. And the stretch in the front is what you're looking for. He's going to make one more rotational move with his glove arm. That arm will not dissociate from that socket. He's going to use his trunk muscles to turn that square. His arm will still be visible. He'll be fully stretched. And then at the last second, he will deliver the ball. And when he delivers, the shoulder blade will come apart from the spine and the arm will internally rotate. So his blade will move outward. His shoulder joint will move towards the plate. And he will have all those muscles that he has on stretch right now, producing force to accelerate the ball. Remember that whenever you're producing force with a muscle, which is what throwing the ball is, it's what hitting the ball is, anything, the muscle is stronger when it comes from a pre-stretched position. It's just like if you're in the bottom of a bench press, you go down, you stretch the chest by the way your shoulder blades retract, and then you stretch it, and the second it's fully stretched, you push the bar up, and by the way, your shoulder blade is coming apart, it is pulling sideways. There are many terms to describe what it's doing. And then the chest moves the bar up. That's the same thing that happens when you're pitching. But what you see here is a relationship between the blade and the shoulder joint. Now, on our youth pitcher, if we were looking at him here, we would not see any part of his right arm. And we would also see that the shoulder blade was not next to his spine. So during rotation is when pitchers lose retraction. And that's the take home skill. The take home skill, which I could have started this with, but nobody would have known what I meant, is when the pitcher rotates from stride foot contact to face the plate, he has to be sure the upper body skill he has to be sure he has is retraction through the rotational phase so he doesn't lose the retraction, which allows the shoulder to move on its own, and he loses all the power of the forward motion of the shoulder blade and the shoulder joint. He will be pitching only with his shoulder joint and will have lost most of the pre-stretch, which produces the force. Now, I just said a lot right there in that sentence. But that's why we had to start at the beginning, or you wouldn't even have any idea of what I'm saying. Now, does that make sense?
Absolutely. To me, it does. I mean,
It's cool, right?
Yeah. It's have a little deeper understanding of. For me, I mean, I understand, what you're trying to teach here and what's going on. But to me, the importance of the front arm is just like that opened it up for me a little bit more. I've always felt it was really important, but to me, that's another key to this.
Well, you know how I always say the darn knee lift and the glove arm are 98% of the problems with pitching motion efficiency. But listen, to any coaches out there that don't get this, call Larry. We'll post his number and he's going to explain it to you. Now, listen, this is all going to become even more clear. So I know some of this might be confusing, but we're getting to something cool now. Okay, now here's what we want to go back to our little young pitcher. And I want you now to look in the first frame on the left. His scaps were probably close together there. Now, if we went behind him, scooped our arms up on his upper arms, and we pulled him backward, he'd have more scap retraction, right?
Correct.
If he had that scap retraction there, when he made his first move towards the plate in the middle photo, that arm wouldn't have popped forward. You see how it popped forward?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes.
And because he didn't have scap retraction, the process of turning, which he isn't really turning, but he is starting to, his brain is wanting him to, he let the shoulder joint dissociate from the blade. Do you see that now clearly in the far right photo?
For sure. Yes.
Okay, so now it's more clear. Okay, now let's go to the next one. Okay. Now, when the pitcher delivers the ball, now what I did is I put him just in a drill position. This is the same pitcher, just because it's the easiest way to describe things. So now we see he's in max external rotation. He didn't turn into this, by the way. He just started here. So the reason why you're not seeing a forearm that's laying completely parallel to the ground is he had no rotational component here. Okay. So he is doing a drill that I use to help pitchers feel full retraction to throwing and to feel them throwing from their shoulder blade. You know how last episode we did on the stride, I could have called that stride from your hips, not your legs.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this is pitch from your shoulder blades, not your shoulder.
Right.
Okay. So he's fully retracted as much as he can. He's fully retracted and he's fully externally rotated. And you can see right through his shirt. You know, you're looking at guys in clothes all the time, you know, in shirts, but, you know, their shirts, the way their shirts wrinkle depicts what's going on underneath it because your skin is like clothes. I mean, it's sitting on top of everything. So you can see his blade is in. Now, notice, so he's fully retracted. There's the word again, retracted. He's contracted. He's contracted on his muscles of his shoulder blade and his external rotators. He's retracted is the exact word for what his shoulder blade is doing, and he is externally rotated with his shoulder joint. Now, what's happening on the front of his body, because now we're getting to the front, and then I'm tying it all together and we're almost done, I promise. The front of his body right now, he is fully retracted. He is fully externally rotated, means he's fully stretched, not just on the front of the shoulder, but he's stretched on the front of a muscle that is on the front of his ribs, right below the chest, that comes from the inside of the shoulder blade. So the shoulder blade has these muscles that pull the blade in towards the spine, but it also has muscles on the front of that blade. And I mean laying on the inside of that bone on the front that delivers the arm forward. So remember, when you've got something stretching on the front, you've got muscles retracted in the back. When you let go of those muscles that are retracted, the stretch in the front converts into force. And by the way, there's also a very important accelerator, and it's the internal rotator of the rotator cuff. It's lying on the inside of that shoulder blade as well. That's why the shoulder blades are critical to stabilizing the shoulder, but also to force production. But we want the bigger muscles to produce the force, not the rotator cuff, because they're busy trying to keep that bone in place. So we've got the front stretching, and now as he delivers, you see how the shoulder blade came completely apart from the spine?
Yes.
And you see how the shoulder, though, is still with the blade?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That action there is of the shoulder blades is called protraction. And the shoulder joint internally rotated. So we have on the far left, we have retraction and external rotation. Those are the muscles that are pulling everything back so the front can stretch. The goal is the stretch because the front muscles pull the arm forward and deliver the acceleration. So we have in the photo on the right, we have protraction and we have internal rotation. So now I'm going to blow your mind. Open up this photo. Okay, now, you know why I couldn't put this at the beginning. Now, everybody get their head on straight for a minute. Now, we're looking sideways. So look at the muscle, the red muscles there. That's called the serratus muscle. Serrati is the word that means fingers in Latin. When you see somebody who's really cut and jacked with six packs for days, you're going to see these little finger-like projections that come in right under the ribs. And that's them. And everyone loves them. And in a bodybuilding contest, you have to have them. This is the serratus muscle. It is the protractor, the main protractor of the shoulder blade. There's other protractors, and again, I don't want to get into this. So, for all you people out there in science, I do know what all the other muscles are that work. We're just mentioning this one to keep it simple. Now, look at the bone that's behind it. So, if we were standing behind this guy, you see the shoulder blade?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Now, look at that socket. We took the arm off of this.
Small.
Yes. Now, do you see where it's located on the blade? It's part of the blade, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's the car. All right. The shoulder joint's the tire.
Right.
Keep them together. The more in your head you keep it together, the more body weight you have behind the ball, the more muscles you have working. Can you see if you're somebody who's all arm and you know what that looks like, right? And now you
Correct.
can explain it even more to yourself. Someone who's all arm, like, for example, the next time you're around a team of youth pitchers and you tell them to go out and play catch to warm up, all arm, disgusting, throwing it sideways, throwing it underhand. I mean, if you just see a bunch of kids playing around, throwing, you see all shoulder joint. And that's and we you don't know you don't previously maybe have the knowledge to know, oh, he's not using his shoulder blades, but now you know, and it looks so different, correct?
Oh,
It's
yes.
sloppy. It's sloppy because it's all arm. And that ball and socket joint, it's your tire. It's your tire. It needs the whole car. So look at the size of it. Okay, now this muscle is lying on the inside of it. So now picture what you saw in the previous, where the arm went forward and the blade moved apart so the arm could go forward to deliver the ball. This muscle is pulling that blade and the shoulder joint around. The pec muscle, picture where the pec would be on this. The chest muscle and the lat in the back are the major accelerators. But guess what? The serratus is third in line. In fact, the rotator cuff muscle that lies on the inside of this blade that controls the bone of the shoulder joint, it's a shoulder joint muscle, not a blade muscle. It happens to be located there, but it acts on the shoulder joint. It's a pretty dominant muscle. The serratus comes in way higher than that when we look at EMG studies. The first time, and this was with a pro pitcher who was already throwing in the 90s, he was a closer. I was able to teach somebody, a pitcher, how to find the serratus. I cannot tell you the difference in what happened to that pitch the first time he really realized retract the shoulder blade and then protract it, taking the arm with it. It is a jump in everything like you can't believe. Can you see, Larry, that if a pitcher could know about these big parts, which are pretty stable, like the blades are pretty stable because they're on the trunk, right?
Yes.
And the shoulder joint isn't stable. If you taught someone how to pitch from the shoulder blades, could you imagine the ability to repeat the release point?
Yeah, no, it's no brainer. I can't wait to get out, and I want to mess with the glove arm a little bit and how it
I'm
looks
so
this, and I
I'm
want
so
to,
excited.
and then with the, like you youth pitchers, like in the
Yes.
photo, I mean just the right away, the velocity, which isn't the overbearing thing with a youth pitcher, but just
Yes.
everything's going to improve greatly quickly.
Oh, it's huge. This is like, to me, this is the first time I studied about the serratus in graduate school. I was drawn to it. And then I started reading EMG studies, and I'm like, and this is way before I even knew what I know now. But I was like, people have to know about this. Now, let's go to the drills I designed. So now these are going to make sense. So open up the next photo, which is your number 10 mound drill. Now, when I filmed him originally, he was doing repeats. And so there were about 9 repeats. And I was giving him instruction. His arm was dropping. And make sure you have this on repeat to the listeners, they'll have it, but have it on repeat for us, Larry, on your screen.
Yep.
But there was a lot of activity in the background. So I took his last rep. So they're going to be exactly the same. But when you have somebody do this and you want them to do 10 to 12 to 16, you're going to see their arms moving because now let's watch him. His trunk is leading. His chest arrives before his arms. So here's the instruction. You stand him up sideways. By the way, this is pitching. You step out and you turn. You step out and you turn. It's if people would just get this. Now, notice you put him sideways and you tell him, just like I asked you to do, bring your arms up, but I want you to have him externally rotated. So tell him to lift his palms towards the ceiling. So now he's got a little bit of external rotation. And now I want you to tell him to, I don't want to use the word pinch, so we're going to tell him to retract fully his shoulder blade. So he's actually intentionally contracting. And if you notice when he's turning forward, you see how the right arm almost looks like it wants to come forward?
Mm-hmm.
That's because the forces are pushing it forward. This is how we get inside elbow problems. The forces are trying to push the arm forward, which means that in sports, if you don't want the arm to come forward, you have to retract in the back harder and you have to maintain the stretch in the front more powerfully. And the amount of stretch you get is increased when you retract more or contract more in the back. So that is why we see elbow injuries and shoulder injuries, because look at all he's doing is stepping and turning, and you can see how his right arm wants to fling forward. And I wish that I could have had all the reps that he was doing, because one time his arm dropped, because remember, there's muscles behind the shoulder that have to be strong enough to hold the arm up. So this is the first drill that you use to teach feel after you've done all the crazy motions of doing shrugs, shrug up, squeeze your blades, move them around, do all kinds of crazy things to introduce yourself to the shoulder blades. And again, please don't do this while you're driving. So this is the first moment you teach feel. So here's my rules. First, you have to understand it. Then you've got to feel it. And this is the second part. Feel it. Are you doing this, Larry?
I was doing it. Yeah, I was. I was doing it along with the video.
I figured you were. And could
Absolutely,
you
for
tell?
sure. Yeah,
And make sure the lead leg is stepping out. So really and truly, this is pitching, right?
correct.
My pitcher loved this drill. Now, then I said, we've got to take it into something better. So now here it comes, the frosting on the cake. Make sure this is on repeat. And here we go. So now I put him in stride foot contact. He's retracted, and he retracts more as he goes into external rotation. Now you're getting all the movements in the scapula, and he's doing both arms because this is a feel drill, and he's feeling. He's in internal rotation. He's in external rotation. He's in internal and external. Now, if you can't do this, then you're not going to be able to enjoy the benefit of accelerating from protraction and internal rotation together. So, the first step in being able to use the front of your body correctly is to make sure that right here, when you're doing this, he is stretching. And in fact, he's pretty cut. You can almost see his serratus through his shirt. Can you see that?
Yeah. No, this
Uh
is
huh.
great. This is what a great
Yes.
drill for, like, especially. I mean, hell, anybody. But
I know. Oh, this drill here is so good. And
yeah.
in my warm up program, by the way, in my warm up, my first pitch strike program,
hmm
all the first section where there's no band are designed to move the blades up and down and through all the ranges. The second phase, where you're not attached to the fence, has pull aparts in it and has motions that include shoulder blade motions. And every one of my exercises is designed to warm up the shoulder girdle and shoulder blades. Now, of course, it's not obvious because everybody thinks they're just warming up their shoulder joint and their arm, but there's so much more to it. And in the gym, a good strength coach should know how to train the serratus, the retractors. He may not know what he's doing, but some of the exercises address this. And when a pitcher knows he's doing an exercise for the retractors, for the serratus, and he understands how to apply it, then things happen and it's much better for the pitcher, and he gets more bang for his buck. Now, Larry, you can have at it, and you can go to the whole spread of photos. And if you want me to reopen something, let me know.
No, this is great. I think the biggest takeaway is for someone that doesn't understand what it feels like for your shoulder blades to be retracted is huge. Is For this kid, it's going to be, eye opening, and it's going to lead to a ton of improvement. And then for me, and the kids I deal with probably, more glove arm issues than anything. And so this really opens some things up. The pictures of the guy you have pitching, where you started him with the drill, where we got a ball in his hand. With a ball in his hand, he's already kind of retracted and he's already at max external rotation. I think that's a really interesting drill, really good spot to be and to teach. Because the first thing I looked at is because I can see it's his glove arm. I'm looking at his glove arm to make
Right,
sure, because
exactly.
the guy I think of years and years and years ago was uh, Steve Avery, who may have gotten there. I'm trying to think because his glove arm was just gone, but he may have gotten to this position. But I think with improper arm action and within your glove, it's going to lead to, well, you're not going to be able to do this. You're not going to be able to. You can't do it properly. You can't retract your shoulder blades properly to help you throw the ball. I don't know if I'm explaining it well, but
Now, I want to give you one more piece to that, because I know this one piece that this is going to be great, and I'm so glad you brought this up. Now, you can have one blade retracted and one blade protracted if you're using and working from your blade. So put both your hands up next to you as if you were on the floor and you're going to do a push-up. And let's go ahead and have the palms facing forward. So you're at the bottom of a push-up, which, by the way, you're fully retracted on both sides. You're at the bottom of a push-up, but you're standing up. Now, I want you to push one arm out, but leave the other one in. You're protracted on one arm, and then you're retracted on the other. Now, in the same rhythm, exchange places. Retract on one side and protract on another.
Right.
Now, the glove arm action usually is doing something different than the right arm. But if the pitcher is pitching from his trunk and not letting the shoulder joints get away from him, he can maintain the balance of both blades and there won't be any problem.
Right. That's huge.
Yes. So anyway,
Huge.
Listen, I'm so excited. So to all the listeners, I know this was a long one, but has been a project of mine for months. It was the scariest podcast for me to do because I'm taking on very complicated information. So what I want you to do is listen to it in parts, listen to it more than once. So Larry, thank you so much for joining me today. This is why I needed you here, because this information is so complicated. I've been preparing it for months, and it was the right time to do it with everything that kind of popped up in the news and also with this great video. So to all my listeners, I know this is complicated. We went a long time, but the information is so important. Please email me if you have any questions, or, it may be that I get so many questions that we have to do a part 2. So, and Larry, that's the same for you too. As you come up with questions, make a note of it, and it may turn out that we need to do a part 2 to this, which can bring us into even more details about acceleration, which is so important, of course. So anyway, thank you so much for joining me today. And to all the listeners, make sure that you check this out on Angel Borrelli Pitching on YouTube. And please go to my website at www.angelborrellipitching.com. And if you're interested in my First Pitch Strike program, it is available on digital format, so it can be downloaded immediately. And every warm-up every exercise that is in that program actually addresses the needs of the shoulder girdle and the shoulder joint. And so thank you again for listening, and be sure and contact me, and always contact me with any questions or any topics that you would like to have covered. Thank you. Bye-bye.